If there's one thing you take away, whether you're just getting started and you're dipping your toes into the paid media pond or you're looking to do a huge, refresh, let your audience do the talking. I think this is so important to put your audience hat on and take a step away from like what your company wants to promote, like why you think something's important. That doesn't matter. You're putting money towards ads to serve your audience. So let them do the talking if at all possible, whether that's, if you have photography you can use or just running some user generated content campaigns, asking your customers to give you quotes, giving folks a sneak peek if you have a report or ebook coming out and asking them if they'll give you a quote for it. You would be really surprised at how willing people are to participate in these types of programs.
Welcome to Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, your dedicated source for mastering B2B social media marketing challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Galton, and in each episode, we dive deep into the complex world of B2B marketing, from effective content creation to strategic social selling, sharing insights and strategies you can use right away. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, where each and every week we're talking to marketing professionals like you, going through many of the same struggles you're going through and sharing their stories. Subscribe to find in each episode the inspiration, the motivation, and the perspiration that go into growing and scaling organizations like yours. Now, have you ever looked at your marketing assets and thought, these look amazing, but are they actually driving results? It's a challenge that keeps many B2B marketers up at night. Your creative assets might be visually stunning, perfectly on brand, and absolutely beautiful, but are they converting? Are they truly connecting with your audience and moving the needle on your business objectives? If you're struggling with this balance between artistic excellence and business impact, you're not alone. Many marketing teams find themselves trapped in this cycle, creating visually appealing content that fails to drive meaningful engagement or conversions. But that's exactly what our guest today is here to help us understand and overcome. Today, we're joined by Meisha Patterson, a dynamic digital marketing expert with a decade of experience who currently orchestrates the digital presence of VMware Explore. As a self-proclaimed marketing enthusiast who's been passionate about campaigns since high school, Meisha has established herself as a respected voice in the B2B marketing space, particularly in the tech sector. She recently led a transformative creative refresh that turned beautiful but abstract marketing assets into powerful conversion drivers, and she's here to share her insights on how to make creative work harder, easier for your business. Hey, Meisha, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me today.
So glad to have you here. Let's start with this challenge that we're talking about that many marketers are facing. How do you go about identifying assets that just aren't working as hard as they could be, even if they look great?
Yeah, it's a struggle I think a lot of marketers have. And I would say keep in mind just because you think something is beautiful, you think something looks great, doesn't naturally mean that that will translate into a high performing asset, or maybe it doesn't resonate with your audience. So I've certainly been in a situation where I'm very close to a project and I think something looks great, but it doesn't hit. And just know that that's normal. That's okay. But what can you do about it, right? So I think the first thing you want to do is really consider your audience and make sure that your assets are actually aligned to your audience. This is something that I think happens more often than folks realize, where you work so hard to create these beautiful assets and then you throw your campaign out and there might be some misalignment in your audience and the messaging and creative. So doing an audit to ensure that, the message and the creative that you have in market is actually aligned to the audience you're trying to reach. But once you're sure you do have that alignment there, I like to say, let the data tell the story here. Engagement can be a particularly effective leading indicator that can tell you, are these ads resonating? Do people care about what we have to say? So looking at things like, are people clicking if that's what you want them to do? Are people commenting? Are they sharing? Are they watching? Like taking the time to stop their scroll and actually watch your video content if you're running video ads. Those can be some really effective early indicators that let you know, yes, what we have out in market is actually resonating with our audience. If you're seeing based on your own historical data, if you have access to industry data, that your performance is not meeting those standards, or if it's falling or lagging over time, that's when I think you want to take a pause and say, okay, digging into why isn't this as effective, and maybe doing some research or getting some feedback from other folks or just starting from scratch, going back to the drawing board and saying, these ads didn't hit, they didn't land. We need to figure out why and take a new approach. And of course, Mike, as you know, in the B2B, there's a lot of nuance. My lens today is from a B2B enterprise event marketing. So there's probably a lot of folks who might work in, a product-led organization or a sales-led organization. Your campaigns and what you're putting out into market are going to might have different goals. And so there's a lot of nuance here, but I think engagement is your leading indicator and can kind of make your spidey senses say, hey, this is not hitting. We need to take a second look at these.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering if you could drill down a little bit more on how you're evaluating creative assets and determining kind of what needs to change. Because if you're talking about a paid ad or a social media post or even a YouTube video, there's the visual aspects of them, the image or the video or the audiogram, right? But then there's also the text. If it's an ad, there's got multiple pieces of text, a headline, a description, and so on. How do we know or how can you kind of into it what's working and what's not and what you might need to change?
I think this is where testing can be your best friend. So whether you're using a lot of platforms now have native A/B testing tools built in. So this is where you can really get down to the nitty gritty and really optimize your campaign. So maybe it's not working, but you want to figure out why. Do some testing. Always test one thing at a time. Multivariate testing can get a little bit more complex and tricky. So I like to start just test one thing at a time. So are we going to test our copy and changing our copy? That's your test. Are we going to test our call to action or what we want people to do? That's a test. Do we want to test different creatives with the same messaging and the same call to action? So I think testing is absolutely the best route where you can start to go in and say, okay, we want to figure out maybe why this isn't working or it's working okay, but we want to see if we can do even better. That's where you want to start with your testing.
Got it. And to your point, if you're doing paid ads, particularly on platforms like Meta, it has that capability built in. If you're doing, email marketing, you can split test subject lines and even parts of the body of the email. Of course, if you're doing social media, organic social media, testing is a little bit more challenging. You
For sure.
can schedule the same kinds of posts days, weeks apart and see how those resonated differently with different audiences, even knowing a lot of it's different because it is different audiences who are seeing those at each time, but it's the best we can do with social media. But let's assume for the moment that we've done some of this stuff, right? We've looked at our assets, we've looked at some posts or some campaigns that are getting less than ideal engagement. We've made some determinations about what needs to change, and maybe it's drastic. Maybe we need to like completely blow away the kinds of graphics or videos that we were creating and build in a new strategy. How do we maintain brand consistency when we are making that significant of a change, whatever that might look like?
I think determining the level of change you want to see is important. I think you can probably think of a few companies where Jaguar is a very relevant example,
Yeah.
where they had a brand refresh, or not even a refresh, but a total rebrand, and it's everybody's talking about it, right? So, kind of identifying the level of change you want and the impact, I think, is important. So, having a total a 180 in your brand and creative strategy, that's a big change. People are going to notice, people are going to talk about it, whether it's good or bad. It's still up for debate for Jaguar, but people are talking about it, right? So I think you want to define that scale of change. Do we want, for an ad campaign, do we want it to feel very different or very outside of the box relative to our existing brand, or do we want it to just be a fresh take on that? So kind of identifying where on the scale you're feeling, and that's ultimately comes with brand team and design team alignment. This can't necessarily be something that the marketing team should or can fully own. I think you absolutely need that brand and design alignment. So for our team, when we did this, I think context is also important for folks. So our company recently went through an acquisition. And in prior event cycles, we had an internal team that would run our paid ad program on our behalf. We partnered with them, we gave them the information they needed, but they basically executed it from there. And it was so great we had those internal resources. But after the acquisition, our team had the opportunity to retake the paid ads program and really kind of define what we wanted the future of this program to be. And in prior event cycles, we had really kind of rinsed and repeated what we were doing. We had kind of our overall event brand. They had some assets that were kind of tied to event milestones and offers, and they built campaigns based on that using kind of repurposing existing assets. And it was a little bit of a rinse and repeat every year where we were running paid ads. It was almost a little bit of a checkbox marketing exercise where we're kind of like, okay, paid programs, they're out there. We can see conversions coming in. We think it's fine. And when our team took this program over, there was just this natural appetite for change. We didn't necessarily have the full historical picture just because folks had left, assets had shifted to different places. So we didn't have a ton of historical context to build off of, which actually I think worked in our favor because there was this natural appetite for change. We had an opportunity to do something different and for our team to own it. And we wanted to make that change. So again, I think it also you want to define why is there this appetite for change and what are we hoping to accomplish and how big of a shift do we want folks to pick up on? And, I find that for maintaining that consistency and initiating these conversations with your brand teams or with your design teams, it's really helpful to come with a vision or with some type of idea or inspiration and to be as specific as possible. It's not helpful to come to your team and say, "Hey team, we're looking for a refresh." That's not the most helpful feedback to give your team. So our team did a lot of deep research and analysis, and we looked at other events within our industry, within our space, but also like completely different events, like consumer events, not B2B related. We looked at some that were B2B, but in different industries and verticals and really pulled together a ton of examples and dissected what we liked, what we didn't like, and then worked directly with our brand and design partners to kind of help shape this new direction, this vision. So that alignment was from the very beginning was very important. Again, we didn't just submit tasks to them and say, "Hey, we want some new ads, like go for it." We really worked together from the beginning to kind of set the vision for what we wanted this program to be.
I love that story. It reminded me of a role I stepped in as CMO about 10 years ago to an online business building company. And basically, a minute after I started the role, they said, "Oh, and by the way, we have our annual sale coming up in like a few weeks." And to your point, what they handed me was all the assets that they've been running every year for I don't even know how many years. It was their same buy one, get one sale that they'd done year to year to year. And when I looked at the metrics, I saw
Mhm.
performance going down year after year after year after year. Well, go figure, this isn't new anymore, right? It's not
Yeah.
fresh, it's not interesting, it's not engaging, on top of some other logistical things, that I saw as a problem with, like, for instance, the fact that it was a buy one, get one, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. If you're building a new business, why would you try to buy a second one? Their idea was you'd gift it to somebody. That
Yeah.
didn't fly. So I completely revamped it, right? We made a holiday sale because it was November when I hit took over, and, we scrapped the buy one, get one concept entirely, and it was the best sale that they'd ever had. I mean, they made $500,000 in, like, 4 weeks. It was incredible. So these kinds of changes can have hugely transformative impacts. To your other point, the jury's still out on Jaguar. We'll see if their rebrand has the kind of impact on automobile sales that they hope it does. I'm guessing not. But I wonder if you could share a little more detail and some specifics about some of these campaigns or assets that you have transformed from being, just beautiful to beautiful and effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the exciting part for me was seeing these ads come to life from just a concept and idea of, we want to move the needle from a performance perspective, but we want to convey the excitement and an emotion of our event. Events are experiences. And I think this should also translate to anybody that works in B2B marketing or marketing in general. We're selling and marketing and communicating and connecting with other humans, right? I think that's easy to forget. So events in particular are very emotional and experiential, things. So people invest in in-person experiences to connect with other people, to engage with other people, to have access to other people, the thought leaders, the speakers. So we really wanted to highlight our vibrant community that our event attracts and build this FOMO by tapping two things: our existing event photography set and also by creating user generated content. We had some initial constraints. I do want to caveat this with folks that are looking to, if you have an event or if you have your own photography, 1000% recommend using real people, having real experiences in your marketing assets. Just make sure that from a data and privacy, perspective that you're checking the boxes. Working in an enterprise organization, sometimes there's a lot of corporate governance, so making sure that you're doing everything in a legal and ethical manner, absolutely. But once you're sure you have met those check boxes, if you do have the ability to use your real photography from your events or experiences, absolutely recommend doing that. So this was a new big change for us. So to set the stage, prior to this event cycle, our event ads were I call them whimsical in nature. They were very illustrative. So an example would be we have a lot of faces that are just like illustrative faces that have lenses. So you might have someone looking into a telescope or has sunglasses on, and those lenses have a beautiful landscape. And these landscapes map to our different event tracks. So once you're attending the event, everything in that event track will map to that landscape. So think, the stages that are built in the room or the presentations that are on the screens. Everything kind of maps to these landscapes. So it's kind of subtle, but it all is very reinforced throughout our customer journey. We have a lot of these elements that are very beautiful and whimsical, and they work really well when you're on site at the event. So we have these immersive experiences where you might be walking down a hallway and you have these it's like dark lights with kind of these illustrated landscapes that come to life in animations, and it's just like very vibey and moody. And all that works super well to set the tone for the in-person experience. Works, people love it, it really sets the tone. But, translating that same concept across digital assets, we just found wasn't really hitting. It wasn't telling the story we wanted it to tell about how exciting and engaging and fun our event is. It just wasn't translating, and that's fine. You can't repurpose every single asset that you have across channels. So that was kind of where this appetite for change came from. We didn't feel like it was really selling our event for us, these existing assets that we had that were, again, very whimsical, illustrative in nature. So for our new direction, and I can share a link, Mike, later if folks want to check out. I have some examples on LinkedIn if they want to actually see these. I know it's a little hard to convey visual things in a podcast format.
Yeah.
So I can share that if folks want to go see some of the new ads. But what we did for the new ones was we pulled, very carefully curated our event photography, said we want to use our actual photos in our ads, showcase real people on site at our event, and we pulled um, pictures that mapped to our event props or value props. So networking and connection, learning and education, people having meetings or doing business, and then just having fun, like pure fun, people having a good time. And we maintain that consistency, again, by being super aligned with our brand team, pulling examples of what we liked and what kind of the vision that we were hoping to achieve. And then pulling in, so we had our event photography, but we still had some illustrative overlays. We had consistency with our brand colors on our brand fonts, where we did have copy on some of the ads. So we kept a little bit of the whimsy, but really shifted the focus to real people having a good time at our event. So that was one way. The second way, which was actually the most impactful, if you take one thing out of this podcast, user generated content, this works super well for organic, but also works well for paid. So we reached out to our community of, people that have come to our event in the past. And because we have we're lucky, we have a team that manages our communities. And we said, hey, how can we reach out to these folks and tap these folks? So we put out a call for submissions for folks that raised their hand and said, hey, we love Explore. We would love to share the word. So we gave them some parameters on either submitting a quote and a headshot or submitting a video with some requirements, but basically saying, hey, I'm so-and-so from this company. I can't wait to attend Explore this fall in Las Vegas. Here's the event dates. Here's why I'm excited. I always look forward to the community and the networking and whatever they wanted to say, and then inviting folks to join them at the event. So it was maybe a 60-minute clip top is what we, asked folks for. Some were a little shorter, some were a little longer, but like a personal invitation from a real person in our community. And we took those quotes and headshots, created some beautiful quote cards, and then use these video clips, added some branded bumpers, again, to have that consistency, but really let our audience do the talking for us and share why they wanted people to come join them at the event. It doesn't matter what we want people to come here for. Let our audience do the talking for us. And those were actually the most impactful ads that we created for this campaign.
Wow, so many great tips and knowledge bombs in there, Misha. Thank you for sharing that. You reminded me of our agency summit that I started doing in
Mm,
2020. We've done it for 4 years in a row at Agora Pulse. Now, that's a virtual event, which is great in some respects, but I've always bemoaned the fact that I don't have that in person ability to take photography like you talked about because that's so
yeah.
impactful. But one of the things that you reminded me that I did was in 2021 for our second annual agency summit. This is coming out of the pandemic, right? 2021.
Yeah.
So we had created this theme of how we're helping agencies grow and scale. So we had this idea of scaling mountains, scaling to new heights, this theme of mountain climbing, essentially. And it lended itself to some nice on landing page visual design and assets. But where I think it took it too far, and you just made this point that helped me realize, oh, this was not good. I we took a I created a video ad. And my design team, my video team, they found some stock footage of people mountain climbing. And I did this really dramatic voiceover reading of how we've come out of this pandemic and we're struggling together and we're trying to achieve new things. And it was really cool and dramatic. And it got like no traction, no conversions at all.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think that's why. It's because people were watching that, literally seeing mountain climbers and not making the connection
Mhm.
that, "Oh, that's supposed to be me. I've never
Yeah.
been in a mountain in my life." So that I think was a really good point and a good reminder, to everybody listening and to myself that, yeah, we've gotta make it really relatable to the people who are consuming our assets, who are watching our videos. Folks, we're talking with Meisha Patterson about how marketers can stop guessing, like I was doing, about what's working on social media and start scaling. I've got several more questions you aren't going to miss, but first, let me share a quick message from Kim Garst.
I personally love Agora Pulse. It's been a life changer in so many ways. One, anytime you have a tool that is kind of a one stop shop from a management perspective, it's awesome. But some of the things I love about Agora Pulse is the ability to tag conversations or to people so that you can follow up with those people and you kind of know who they are. The other thing I love is being able to see all the conversations, previous conversations, specifically in Twitter. And of course, now that you can schedule to Instagram, that's awesome. So I'm super thrilled about that. I have used a lot of different tools, pretty much all of them, over the course of the time that I've been active in social media. And when I first started using Agora Pulse, and I realized that it had so many of the same functions of some of the other tools, but it went deeper. It gave you more ability to do, things that some of the others just didn't have that capability. So I've huge fan.
So, Misha, you were talking a moment ago about looking at engagement to tell whether or not a particular post or ad or creative is doing well. Could you dive into that a little bit more and share that or any other metrics that we might be taking a look at to help us understand how these creative assets are performing and kind of try to balance the quantitative versus the qualitative?
Yeah, I think qualitative and quantitative, it's very easy for folks to get tied up in the data. So I think looking at both is important and trusting your gut in some areas is also important. But to speak specifically to the metrics that we cared about for this campaign, and again, I think context is helpful. So this was for our Explore event, which took place in August of 2024. We had some wonderful agency partners that helped us structure and build this campaign, but we very much worked in tandem to kind of define what is the campaign going to look like this year. Again, knowing that we had an opportunity to start from scratch. Whatever we did in previous event cycles was out the window. We wanted to do it a little bit differently this year. So we worked with them to define this was a fairly large and holistic campaign. It wasn't just running one ad type or focusing on one platform. It really was multi-platform, multi-channel, with the ultimate end goal for us of converting people to buying a ticket to our event. So that was the end goal. I think it's also important, especially in B2B marketing, to understand consumer behavior and knowing that, how people behave and how people purchase an enterprise event ticket or purchase a B2B software. There's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of complexity. So we knew that realistically, we can't set our goal for every campaign to be a conversion. That's not realistic, right? We wanted to build, again, a holistic campaign where we were driving awareness within our defined set of targets for our audience. So building that awareness, nurturing folks through some thoughtful retargeting campaigns, and then driving them to convert, which is purchasing the ticket for the event. We also knew that behavior-wise, again, purchasing a ticket for a business event, based on our prior year's data, we knew that most people are doing this via a desktop device and during work hours. So we knew that running ads on social, while this was important to us for our building that awareness and continuing to nurture folks to keep our event top of mind, we just saw the data. People are not purchasing these event tickets like on their phone while they're sitting on the couch. This isn't like a one-click Amazon purchase, right? So for us, we were driving people with this umbrella campaign to drive that awareness and then nurture people with retargeting touches. And then ultimately, we were capturing them through branded search for that conversion. While they're on their desktop, they're like, oh, yeah, VMware Explore, I need to go look up that event. So that's how we were measuring our overall success was conversions attributed back to paid media and what our cost per registration was. So overall, we had some historical benchmarks around how much we typically paid to acquire a customer via our paid channels relative to our other channels, right? So we kind of set a goal around that. But then more holistically, we worked with our agency to kind of define, okay, what are some engagement goals, whether depending on the campaign type around, maybe that's clicks. Do we have a solid enough click-through rate to kind of indicate this creative's working or this messaging's not hitting? So clicks was important. Really anything engagement related. So were people commenting? Were people tagging other people? We ran thought leadership ads. So this is where we saw a lot more conversations happening in comments and people tagging people or saying how excited they were about, a specific session. So those got a lot of engagements from a comments perspective and a like perspective. Our video ads, were people taking the time to, again, stop the scroll, whether it was on LinkedIn or whether it was on YouTube, to actually sit and watch these video ads that we were putting in market. So we had some, time watched or percentage watched, and we're keeping an eye on that. And then again, based on engagement for these kind of broader ads, that's where we started building our retargeting list to hit them with, okay, we showed them a sizzle reel or a hype video for the event. Now we're going to move them into a retargeting bucket where they're getting a testimonial video or different types of messaging. So creating this holistic journey, starting with engagement as your kind of metric and then building your retargeting lists from there to move them through this journey.
That makes a lot of sense. And to your point, when you're running paid ads or other kinds of campaigns, it's usually fairly easy to track the progression, the click-through rates, and that sort of thing. When it comes to organic social media specifically, that's usually where a lot of B2B marketers have challenges. Were you able to connect the dots, so to speak, between the organic social media activities and the results you were seeing to actual business results?
We did see some impact from organic, but definitely much more attributed to our paid. And I think there was just a lot of nuance in our business in terms of the pages that we have and how different divisions are running it. So our team had a little bit more control and autonomy from a paid perspective. So that's where we kind of chose to focus some more of our efforts this year.
Makes sense. Now, are there any specific tools or resources that you've been turning to help with creating these kinds of assets and determining just how effective they might be?
Yes, so as I mentioned, we have some fantastic agency partners. So I would imagine they have their own tools that they use that I am not privy to. But from our perspective, we worked very closely with the LinkedIn team. So we did have some resources there that were able to help us. And LinkedIn has a lot of great resources. One of my favorite is actually the LinkedIn ads library. So this was really helpful for me when I was pulling together some inspiration and some research for our campaigns. You used to be able to go to a business page or an event page or whatever page it was, and on that page, you could see what ads folks were running, which was super cool. But now they've consolidated all of this into the LinkedIn ads library. So, absolutely recommend checking that out if you're looking for inspiration, doing research. Dribble was also another, it's not really a tool, but it's kind of just like a design community. I like to go there to find inspiration and kind of see just creative new ideas that are outside of the box and kind of get outside of my B2B marketing purview. That's a fun one. And then really we leaned on also just like the native platform reporting, trying to get as close to the data as possible. So, our agency, they were pulling reports from, whether it was LinkedIn, which our team also has access to, or YouTube or Meta, kind of going to the source of truth and trying to rely on the platform's data as much as we could. And then also, I just saw today, I have not used it and I have no affiliation, but I just saw it and I'm excited about it. Superside actually just launched a new tool called superads.ai, which supposedly I have not used it yet. So again, not plugging it, but um, it's designed to really help connect the dots between your creative and performance and kind of get to the bottom of what we were talking about earlier, like helping you figure out like why something is or isn't working. So could be a new one for folks to try out if you're in the space.
That is a fantastic tip. Great advice. And one thing I'll add to that for those of you listening, on top of measuring what's working, you also need to make sure that you're staying on top of those comments and engagement that Misha was talking about a
Yeah.
moment ago. That's one of the things that Agorapulse really excels at. You can connect all of your ad platforms, regardless of what social channel you're doing paid ads, and make sure that you're not missing those comments. Because if you run an ad natively on, like, say, a Facebook page, and it's not a post that you boosted, right? You just placed the ad out there, you're not gonna see it in your normal native notifications. You'd have to go into Ads Manager, and nobody wants to go into Ads Manager. So, try
No,
nobody wants to do that.
nobody wants to do that.
No, no. So for marketers who are just kind of starting on this journey, they're trying to figure out, okay, where do I even begin? How do I know what's working, what's not? How would you recommend that they start to make a couple of changes just to get some quick wins and make their creative work harder for them?
Yeah, I think this goes back to what I said earlier. If there's one thing you take away, whether you're just getting started and you're dipping your toes into the paid media pond or you're looking to do a huge, refresh, let your audience do the talking. I think this is so important to put your audience hat on and take a step away from like what your company wants to promote, like why you think something's important. That doesn't matter. You're putting money towards ads to serve your audience. So let them do the talking if at all possible, whether that's, if you have photography you can use or just running some user generated content campaigns, asking your customers to give you quotes, giving folks a sneak peek if you have a report or ebook coming out and asking them if they'll give you a quote for it. You would be really surprised at how willing people are to participate in these types of programs because it kind of also puts them, elevates them and puts them on a spotlight. So really let your audience do the talking for you. And I think, that will be the win. These were, like I said, the best performing assets that we put out into the market. And just to give you an idea of what I mean by like our best performing assets, we ran, these video ads where we had these folks inviting people to come to our event. We had quote cards with headshots. So a lot of, again, pulling directly from our community, assets that featured them, or we ran thought leadership ads. And that set, we just kind of bucketed it together as user generated content. Those ads generated 70% of the engagement for our campaign as a whole. So when I say they perform the best, I meant they got a bulk of the engagement relative to the other types of messaging we had out there.
Love it. And I can totally relate to everything you're talking about because as chief storyteller at Agorapulse, my big role is to talk to customers and invite them to have a conversation that's, 30 to 45 minutes of their time, which is not insignificant, right? And we're going to publish an article about them. And they're always happy to go on and talk about, what they're doing in social media and, how we've helped them, even in some little way. And that's fantastic. And we appreciate those kinds of conversations. Now, we're recording this, it's the end of 2024. So looking ahead, 2025, the next couple of years, what are some of the trends that you see or the directions that you see creative design going in this intersection of design and actual business impact?
Yeah, I spoke a lot in this episode about how we leaned into user generated content. And I think we had a nice happy medium of we still had control of the assets and we were able to put our own flavor and design into it. I think what I'm seeing is the next generation of that is going to be brands partnering more with creators to help them elevate their brand and drive more awareness in whatever area they're in. I think that will naturally result in brands having to give up a little bit more control or have to let the creators kind of take the creative wheel in some cases, which might put, people in a little bit of a space where they're like a little bit uncomfortable, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I think the next generation of user generated content is going to be this kind of creator led advertising and partnerships.
Absolutely. This is something that I've talked to folks at TikTok about a lot because that's something that they see in their trending
Yeah.
content and their ads, this user generated content that brands then turn into their own creative, their own ad copy, and so on. So I think you're spot on with that. And this has been really just a terrific interview. Thank you so much, Misha. You've created and shared so many interesting stories and things for us to think about. So for folks who want to learn more about you, where can they go and connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time on the interwebs. So you can find me, Meisha Patterson. Definitely happy to connect with anyone and would love to connect with other B2B marketers or anyone. Always happy to chat.
Terrific. Thank you. And folks, we'll have all of Misha's links and everything in the show notes below, like we always do. And don't forget to find the Social Pulse Podcast B2B edition on Apple and drop us a review. We'd love to know what you think. Until next time. Thank you for joining another episode of Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, hosted by Mike Alton and powered by AgoraPulse, the leading social media management solution. Learn more at agorapulse.com. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and leave us a review. We value your feedback and look forward to bringing you more useful insights.